You're listening to NFT365, the first daily podcast on NFTs with your host, Fanzo, talking crypto, blockchain, Web3, non-fungible tokens, metaverse, and...
What the f*** is a non-fungible token?
We'll get to that.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT365. One of the things I've loved about the idea of what Web3 offers us is that I don't know about you, but I'm one that doesn't really work well in a box. I'm one that every time I would hear things like the riches are in the niches, I would be like, crap, I'm just not going to be rich. Because anytime I've tried to niche down, anytime I've tried to do only one thing and it's not saying like only like focus on one thing, but like, cause I think focus is important, but I love kind of tapping into, my multi-hyphenness, or, I know there's a TED talk about multi-passionate, or even just the idea of like all of the things that we love to do. I think Web3, allows us to tap into that in some really creative ways. And I have a great guest for us today that we're gonna, talk a little bit about how he's kind of, in his new role, kind of handling multiple facets. And we're gonna have a really great conversation on that. But before I get into that conversation, I do need to, we have to, pay the bills, right? We have to, give a shout out to our sponsor, Crypto Business Conference. Crypto Business Conference is happening in beautiful San Diego, California. That is, if you are new to Web3, wanting to learn about all things, let's just say NFTs, crypto, metaverse. Maybe you were watching the VMAs last night and you were like, what in the world? Snoop Dogg and Eminem are playing in the metaverse as Bored Apes, and you want to learn more about that. Definitely check out the event. I'll give you the links, and everything will be in the bio below. So you can, in the show notes, you can check that out and we can jump in there. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest, and I'm going to click off of that full screen of me. Mikey, thanks so much for joining the show. Our audience, we've mentioned 2 Cents Audio, which is one of the things that you're a part of, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into that part of it, let the audience know a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you, from where you were before to this, Web3 world that you're in today.
Oh, well, first, I want to thank you for having me on. I'm a big fan. I mean, we've no pun intended, and we got to connect a couple times, and I'm just, I'm in awe of everything that you do. I think your lead in terms of, I think there's another term like polymath that's trying to make a comeback in terms of that multi-hyphenate. I watched like how you work with your children, your daughters, how you're doing art, this every day, the ability to mint. Like, yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to kind of approach life and not get too hemmed in, because I think it all weaves together and presents this great tapestry. So for a little bit about me, my name's Mikey Piro. That's me, fully doxed. It's kind of how I've operated for, forever, really. And it started in my kind of online career. I had a blog when I came back from Iraq where I was writing a lot and chose to kind of just really put it out there as my full self. It was about, I think you and I have dotted back and forth around the world, around the same timelines and around a lot of the same places.
Yeah.
And so the blog was about kind of recovering from PTSD and how to really get back, my head straight and back online. Around that same time, I was working at a smaller software startup that then turned into a larger software company. And from that software startup, I kind of got my next two jobs, and they were all in software and they were all in building products. And that's really something that I've been really passionate about for my whole life. And entrepreneurial spirit wise, when I came back from Iraq, I needed to set my own hours. And I was like, well, I just need to just make my own money so I can set my own hours. So those two companies then evolved where I was kind of recruited into now called Meta, but was Facebook at the time, and sat in the same chair there working on some pretty fun and hairy problems of trying to like connect as many people to the internet to kind of do social good. And tremendous experience and a lot of fun. I don't throw shade on Meta. I think they're really trying, and I think that it's a pretty complicated series of things that have happened there. But I think for me personally, it was time to move along, and I was very excited to get back into that entrepreneurial spirit and really dive in. And that's where I founded 2 Cents, which is a podcasting platform that hopes to like evolve more onto interactivity. So I'm going to overshare and just keep going. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was staring down a divorce. My ex and I are on really great terms, and we're co-parenting. But it was still like, for the first time in my life, I was a single dad, and I was really trying to get my feet underneath me. And then 2020 hit and the pandemic hit, and I was really just struggling to understand how to just do everything, keep working, because I was still at Facebook, be a dad, be present as a dad, and also cook. It wasn't as much driving at that point, but there was some, and clean and keep everything moving in the house. And I couldn't get on Clubhouse because it was always live, and it just never really matched my schedule. But I could listen to podcasts, and I could listen to audiobooks, and I could keep my hands free to like cook and clean. And I know you're simpatico on this in terms of, it never stops. So my co-founder and I were thinking like, well, what if you were able to just like leave messages on podcasts? And what if you were able to like asynchronously communicate? Twitter does it all text, but if it was all audio, then those people could listen and talk back. And that was the foundation of it. Then we started down this Web3 path as things started to evolve, and we saw that there was an even better opportunity to differentiate. And that Web3 rabbit hole, man, it pulls hard and deep and fast. And so 2 cents now, we're on the precipice of launching our token gated offering, where if you're a community member, which is a really important part, I think, what I want to talk with you about, of like your community and then the Club CPG community. So that community is really what we're putting forward first on the, and the tokening. And then because it's an app-based experience and not one that's web-based, we have a lot more controls around how we can make that experience better. And so we have ways for people to listen and accumulate raffles, and we have a way for them to mint cover art. And so we're trying to make it so that you're collecting the audio experiences of your community. And so that's where we've kind of been driving 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of things I want to tap in there. I mean, one of the things you kind of like grazed through was, first off, thank you for your service. Much appreciated that. The sacrifice. For me, it was still, the greatest time in my career was, as a government contractor, being able to support, those in uniform, and and then of course, from the military side, even into Facebook, right? And I think, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd fathom to guess there's not a lot of ex-military that are in Facebook's ecosystem. Maybe I'm wrong, but I like just that connection had to be interesting, kind of segue as well, right?
Well, thank you for your service, because we certainly, it's a, teamwork makes the dream work, and you're literally, we is greater than me. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I was an infantryman, so it was a very interesting kind of master's or PhD level degree in leadership at a very intense time with a lot of consequential outcomes. So part of what I pride myself on is like the leadership experience and growth that I did during that time still carries over to hopefully how I conduct myself now. And then it's funny that you mentioned the veteran side of things. So while I was at Facebook, I actually was for a time, until I left, the co-lead of the veterans ERG there.
Oh, wow.
And so as an addition to what I was trying to do with my job in the connectivity and infra side, I just volunteered to be the co-lead of the vets group. And that was fascinating because fun fact, there's actually data centers on submarines. And so we heavily recruited out of the Navy submarines crews to run the data centers that were on land. And so we had a lot of veteran presence in the data center space specifically and globally. We also, when I was there, my co-lead and I, we rolled out like a chapter framework. So we had over 5,000 veterans where we were taking them into a mentorship program. We were putting on leadership seminars where we would bring in like the Medal of Honor recipient Kyle Carpenter came and spoke with us for 3 days. And we brought in a lot of others. Our sponsor was Boz by the time we left. So we had like a lot of really interested folks that were trying to make sure that veterans, as an intersectional group, were able to flourish. And so a lot of it was, some tough transitions for veterans, and then especially into the fast-paced culture of Facebook. So I took a lot of pride in mentoring and building out that program. And then met Cheryl a couple of times. So it was a really fun ride. The thing that I'm most proud about it, though, is that the work on that leadership forum actually got me into the diversity and inclusion forum for product review as an employee.
Wow.
So I got to work with Maxine Williams specifically on like changes that were coming to the platform that they were reviewing. And I was the cis hetero white male representative. And I have a lot of other things, but as a veteran as well. But it was really great to hear the global feedback on the product, have the information that was researched well and like what the changes were and trying to figure out what the ordered implications were. And Maxine was phenomenal. But I wanted to go work at a large tech company. It was either going to be Google or Facebook. And I, tried to build the skill set to really make sure I was a competent enough person to get hired. And then the interview process is intense for those tech companies. So it was a great learning experience all along the way.
I love that. And it's interesting when we get to the end, and for everyone that's here, like we're talking about like, mentorship and the incubator kind of, leadership component and how that kind of even connects into some of the things with CPG, which will be fun part of the conversation. We have a lot of synergies, right? When you said, submarines having data centers, right? I spent many days on the dock waiting for a submarine to come port so that I could update the firmware that was on that damn submarine, which is kind of funny in my, my government background side. And then I worked at the data center for a little over 2 years. And you and I connected on a whole bunch of things. Also, being, trying our best to be the best allies that we can be, and recognizing, where our role fits in there. And even as dads, right, in the co-parenting role of dads. And, you mentioned about like, not only, the background military, the Facebook side, but, one of the things that like hit me when, we were first talking, for those that have listened to the podcast since day one, one of the things I said, I think first week that we started the podcast was like, I want to do listener to earn, right? Like I want to reward all of you that are listening to the podcast. And, we came up with the idea of like, you have to listen every day and we'll give you, 4, secret words. You have to go on the website. And, the beauty of it was like, for me, was like, kind of testing on the fly, but there was elements of it that like, my biggest pain point, and this is, as someone that's, I've hosted lots of podcasts before, was that, podcasts are really in the weirdest way, the most intimate medium, but the least social medium of all of the mediums, right? Like in like the, and anyone that's out there, I mean, if you think about it, when's the last time like you interacted and had a conversation with other listeners of the podcast, or even the podcast host itself, right? I'm right now currently addicted to group chat news. I'm just love that podcast for, and funny thing is I had never knew they had a podcast, and I just watched their TikTok clips, and it was like 4 months of TikTok clips before I was like, you know what? I wonder what the whole podcast is like. And, it hit me that, funny enough, I actually followed all 3 of the hosts, the 3 main hosts, already on Twitter, but we hadn't had like a social engagement because in like that weirdest kind of separation of things, podcasting is like, it's intimate because where it's audio, it's in people's ears, the listener can paint their own picture, but it is always been disconnected. And I think even some of the, the biggest podcasters in the world that have grown from the start, they would tell you like all they did was drop their links onto Twitter. Right. And so I love that like origin, because the piece of it that was aha for me was Clubhouse, right? All of a sudden I was like, wait a second, this is social audio. This is participatory content. And like, for me, that was such a beautiful component, but it never hit me until you and I started talking. And I was like, wait, why isn't social audio and podcasting have, some kind of, kind of connection there? Because podcasting is beautiful because it's on demand. As you said, we're not like, we're not stuck on someone else's timeline. The same with Twitter Spaces. I know right now people are like Clubhouse, because Clubhouse was the thing. And now, NFT world has owned the Twitter Spaces world. But the thing I wanted to throw to you on that, like, when you were having that like aha of like, okay, podcasting is where I'm at, but like I'm still looking for that interaction and like shared consumption experience. I'm curious, and this is something I've always just like asking founders from the standpoint of like, did you immediately jump to like, well, there's nothing out there, I should create it? Because for whatever reason, although I have a tech background, it takes me a while to get to the, I'm like, oh, I'll just complain. I'm the guy that complains. Like, man, I wish that this had this, or I'll try to hack something together. But I love that you went to like building out something that was actually going to solve that problem. How did that like kind of, aha of like, I wish this existed, to, hey, let's build it. How did that kind of come to life?
I talk to myself a lot, and I talk to myself a lot just in general. I love using voice comments and recording, and I watched my kids do it too, and I watched other kids do it, where with the advent of like our AirPods being in our ears, and like we share this in certain ways. Like, so my daughter has dyslexia.
Yep.
She's been struggling to learn to read, but she loves talking to me through text by talking into the text to speech
Yep.
or speech to text and then sending me them. And they're cute and adorable, but those are the things that started to be like, oh, this is something that didn't exist when podcasting started. Text isn't really as useful for us in this medium. We need to be able to hear it, the intonation, the tone, all of those things like come to light. And so when I was thinking about like, all right, there's probably a good way to do this, and I don't want to use my thumbs because they're usually like on clothing or making dinner when I'm doing it. So what would be easy? Just tap a button and talk. It also, when I started to dissect it even more so, the world is littered with failed podcasting apps. It's a very hard one to get into people's inboxes or to get through their habits and their cloud. But I also feel like there's a ripe opportunity with Web3 and with the tech that's kind of formed, where they complement each other really well. The pseudonymity and the aspect of like where parts of Web3 are moving forward in where you can control how the media comes to you. Well, podcasting was built that way by default. It's always been a pull.
Yep.
It's never been pushed to you. And so that element overlaps, the pseudonymity overlaps. And then the tech has kind of gotten to the point where we can like easily throw bites over the air and record them and making a more rich experience. And there had been other apps that had tried it. I think the timing of this, where you talk about it a lot, and I fully believe it, and that's really why I'm also really invested in Club CPG, is the community aspect of it. Like, podcasters that are successful have that community, and as you said, like they want to have that intimate experience. Maybe some of them don't want to talk to their audience, but I think a lot of folks, when we go to these conferences or when we talk to people, they want to start a podcast. Like, the feedback is critical to tuning what's working and what's not. And again, because it's so much a pull, like you don't have a lot of information at your fingertips. So it felt like a better way, and one that like I wanted to see. And it's hard to like actually build something. If you wanted to build a competitor to Instagram, you can do that in the tools that are available now. But if you want to have something that's more interactive, that uses audio, you've got to kind of only build it, because you could show somebody something, but until they put it in their ears and you and I are talking back and forth on 2 cents, it's hard to wrap your mind around like, well, why would I need this? Or why is it fun?
Well, and I think, I told you this before, like I was one of the very first 10 users of Anchor when Anchor rolled out. Before Anchor became a podcasting platform, before they came bought by Spotify, it was literally the idea of, how could we create technically a podcast of shared sound bites that were kind of pieced together, right? So it was like a call-in radio show. And I remember and this was, I think 2019, I think, is when that all kind of maybe actually it was probably earlier than that. It was probably 2017, I think, was probably when that was all going down. And I remember like I went to South by Southwest with the Anchor team that year that we were all doing that. And the thing that I kept telling people is that like the shared consumption experience is so undervalued, underrated. And if everyone thinks about it today, right, like the idea of how we consume Netflix and our TV shows has changed, right? We want it where we want it, how we want it, when we want it. But there is a lost element of like everyone coming in. Like I remember when I worked at the data center, and it was actually during some of those my favorite shows, from like The Wire to even Sopranos in college.
The Wire.
The Wire. Oh, it's my top. Someone tweeted. Shout out to Data. Data was one of our past guests. He actually tweeted out yesterday. He's like, top 3 favorite TV shows ever, and I was like, oh, I got that. Like, I mean, for me, it was
Breaking Bad, The Wire, Sopranos.
Okay, so mine was Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, and The Wire. That was my 3 there. Of course, I love those pieces as well. But I mean, this is a great example of when we think about it. And like right now, House of Dragons is going on with HBO, and last night was an episode, and I spent the day with my kids, and I was like, But the part of it that to me I was looking forward to is like, I wanted to watch this show as it comes out so I could interact with others that are watching the show on Twitter. And that like shared experience is so, I mean, it's why we go to in-person events for all intents and purposes, right? Like it's the networking off of a shared experience where we all watch the same speaker and then we can all have that kind of conversation. In the podcasting world, there really hasn't ever really been that kind of experience. Even, you could argue even Joe Rogan's, YouTube comments, like they don't get hot and heavy until like 48 hours, 72 hours after a show. And sometimes they don't get, until 2 weeks later, people go back and kind of connect to a show. And so, I love that component, right? And I think you're right on the timing, right? Social audio, like let's be real. I mean, Clubhouse does not turn social audio on its head if it wasn't for a pandemic. And like I jokingly was the first, one of the first times I was like, does everyone realize we are on a conference call with like blinking, our picture blinking on a screen? Like this is not innovative. Like I hated conference calls in 2005 and now I'm spending, hours there every day. But it was and I think one of the things that I really love about this, what you're doing with 2 cents, and it kind of factors in the social audio, is when the mediums don't match, there's always a hierarchy of the way that content or conversations are delivered, right? And I love live video. I've talked about live video a lot, but like live video to me was great, but it was always me on video and people replying on text. And no matter how great you are at making that participatory, there's always kind of like, it's like, there's like a stage and everyone's down below, right? And it's like, man, I would love for people to be able to jump in and out. And there was this tool called Blab, and rest in peace Blab, but it was one of my favorite tools because it was Brady Bunch live streaming, and I could pick anybody out of the audience and they could pop right in next to me. We could have 4 squares and interact all day, every day. And so the piece that I think is so interesting in what 2 cents goes, and it goes into Web3 in the community component, is something that I've struggled with. It was one of the first things I ever said to you was, man, I've tried to get my audience to move off of damn Apple Podcasts, and it is a freaking nightmare, right? And when you kind of put back and like, well, hey, these are some of the things we're thinking about and our value. One of the things also hit me was that those times when I was trying that was also when I was lucky to get someone to listen to a podcast, let alone they even know that the podcasting app is on their phone. But the other component of it is where we're at now with NFTs and Web3, is that we weren't able to reward or celebrate or champion those that were willing to kind of come forward, right? So it was very much like it was even a pull in that way. Like, please stop using the app already installed on your phone. Go download, and I mean, I tried them all, right? From Stitcher to, iHeartRadio. I mean, we were kind of playing around. And so I'm curious from your standpoint, and we're going to talk a little CPG as well, because I think there's a kind of beautiful synergy. And like the team behind CPG, I knew way back when from, my Web2 days. And I love the idea of like reimagining something that tried and in many cases worked, or was working, but it wasn't probably the right time, and doing that in Web3. I'm curious for, as you look at, what 2 cents audio is, we'll put some links in the show notes for those that are following along here on the audio side. But when you think about like because people sometimes are like, NFTs, it's just a photo, or, I don't want to, participation trophy. That's my words, usually not theirs. How do you look at like that, like rewarding and incentivizing, and even that little bit of gamification on how we can help people adapt to new habits, like a new consumption of a podcast app?
Yeah, I think, I had the great opportunity to interview Keith Grossman in the Head of Time a couple weeks ago. And he actually, I was reading a tweet this morning he put out where he's like, look, it's not about the tech. The tech is beautiful and great. He's like, if you want mass market adoption, it's all about the experience that has to be built and the comfort. And that was really the hewing of like, we had this, this lump of clay or this, block of marble, and we've been chipping away at it to really get to the point where it should be better than what your Apple experience is. And that means that it works seamlessly, but also the perks and the things that you accumulate are also just happening. Like the first few iterations of it, it's like, well, because of the way wallets worked and because of the way this and that, we had to make people click on stuff. And we've stripped all of that out. It's kind of like, it's like magic. You listen, you get these accumulation of all of these beautiful tickets for every 5 minutes you listen that automatically enters you. You don't have to do anything. It's automatically entering you into the prize for that week or the giveaway. And then at the end, When you finish listening, you just tap mint, and it mints you the cover art and all the data behind that, which we think we want to hear from the audiences and hear from is like, if I listen to Joe Rogan or I listen to iSocial Fans on the day it drops within a certain amount, that's now metadata that we can assign to the cover art that you've collected into your experience. And that then gives you as a community manager and a community builder a way to look at like, who are those folks? And in a pseudonymic way, because we're not giving you everything in just a wallet. And so you can reward those folks by how they interact and how they engage. And there's also still the social element of like people leaving comments and feedback that also can build into that experience. So it really comes down to making it as magical as possible and as seamless as possible, because asking people to do another thing, like I don't want to ask you and your team to do another thing. I want it to just be like, you publish your podcast, it's automatically ingested, people listen to it, they automatically get entered, they automatically, like everything has to be where it's like, don't make me think, don't make me work any harder, because that's the barrier to get it. It could be the greatest thing ever, but if it's too much friction, nobody's going to use it. And that's what we're really tripping away at.
Well, and I will tell, I mean, I have the great example of that is, we did the first 5 months of this year with our, our listen to earn, NFTs, and we dropped an NFT, the first 5 months of the year. But from Kevin on our team, who happens to do the intro music as well, the amount of manual work, right? From verifying people going to the website, we had to turn, we'd have a certain amount of time, people had to put in their answers. Then we had to make sure that we had their wallet address so we could airdrop them, an NFT. And we were doing this a lot of like, it was multi-step. And I'm very proud, we had a couple hundred people that were doing it each month, participating. But part of that became a thing where it was like, I can't have Kevin doing all that manual things on top of it, over and over. And, on the other piece of it is like, with every reward, I believe, there also has to be a utility component or a giveaway. And I think those things are what I think most people underestimate on like the amount of work and the things that kind of go into that. And that kind of ties nicely into CPG. I'm curious, how did you first kind of discover that community and kind of what they're building there? And kind of how did that turn into, kind of the role that you have now within that community?
So it's a big shout out to Jeremiah Aoyang. I don't know if you follow him on.
Jeremiah is the only reason I have a coin. So ADHD coin was only because Jeremiah reached out and said, Fanzo,
let's sing the
you need a coin.
praises.
So yes, Jeremiah is a great one.
A super gracious, intelligent, and really thoughtful dude that is about connecting people. I actually I would follow him on Twitter, and we actually work out in the same CrossFit gym, which was pretty bananas. Wow. So I bumped into him in real life, and he's like, hey, I'm putting on this NFT get together. He's like, in the pandemic, I really want to make sure that it's in a safe spot. And I was like, cool, I'm vaccinated. I'll commute up with you. And so I went up to SF and had a meeting, or not a meeting. It was an NFT gathering to try and spread the love. And people were talking about Club CPG. And I went back and did a ton of research, and I was actually super fortunate. Like, part of my work with veterans and part of like my desire to building in Web3 as we were incorporating that into 2cents, I was gifted my CPG pass. And the experience of how I was brought in through the 12 days of CPG and then into the Telegram group was just, it was second to none. I mean, I think a welcoming community. Everyone was very open to like talking and meeting. I got a whole bunch of feedback on my product, on 2cents, just how to do this better. There are no stupid questions. Everyone is really willing to help. And it stems from the foundation of how Club CPG and Chris and Jamie, live and what they want to see in the world. And it just really resonated. I think it resonates with you as well in terms of their emphasis on, Jamie has My BFF along with a bunch of other folks. And that's specifically about bringing women and BIPOC folks into Web3. And Club CPG is about building and builders coming together from all around the globe on a wide array of everything from protocols to drops to actual CPG, merchandising. You've got this really experienced group of folks who are trying, like, there aren't any experts in Web3 that I can tell, or very few.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's changing so fast. So the approach can't be this one where you like know better, because you really don't. And so coming in with a very curious mindset and one that's also willing to help is where everybody from Club CPG that I've encountered has that beautiful mindset. And when you bring a large group of folks together like that, you're able to really both feel like you're getting so much out of it. But then when you make like some offhand comment of like, oh yeah, I did this and you should check this out, it goes a long way towards helping somebody else go and build what they're building. And that's like all that's happening every day in these chats in CPG. So Chris was brilliant in bringing on Raf to head up the incubator full time. And so we have these 5 pillars that are CPG. So the community is most important to us, of like making sure they're taken care of. And CPG has a Genesis token from the Clubhouse days. Yep. And then we launched Pop in May of, was it May? It was May of last year. And so that ballooned out to where there's like 3,000 people that are involved in Club CPG. And at that time, we had the consultancy that was kicked off, where we consult bringing Web 2 brands to Web 3. We have the incubator, which we'll talk about a lot more. There's a media arm, which my experience with 2cents and having been in the podcast world, like all the media that we're putting out, I'm helping kind of coordinate and corral that, and have a great team with Janet and Chad working on that. And, we've got, a couple of things coming. We've teased a bit of the brand and what we want to do for the commerce experience. The incubator is our point of effort right now. And we launched the incubator for any builders in Web3 to come in. And it's a unique model in that we don't take equity. Club CPG doesn't take equity, but they expect the product that you're delivering to be beneficial to the community and to be offered to the community. And when we saw the flood of folks that were applying, we had over 200 people apply, or entities apply for the incubator. Wow. We realized like, well, we just need to keep this going for everybody that applied. And so we recently launched last week the Builders Club, which is like you're automatically in it if you're a member of it, and it puts in a cadence, and we're putting together a curriculum and working on some collabs to really bring folks in that are experts to help a wide array of things that you'll bump up against no matter what you're doing in Web3. And so again, that spirit of making sure that we're inclusive, making sure that we have our foundation and our North Star to build things that are of quality with great people who are curious and who are really willing to help. That's where the beauty of, I think, the Web3 community, for the folks that are still sticking around and who really want to get after it, that's, where we're at. And that's why we're pulling this together.
Well, and I love the, in that background, and we'll put links to CPG in the show notes. And, and I think, for me, I was actually in a lot of those Clubhouse rooms, right? And I remember, Chris's vision, and I'll just say, I'll be very transparent, because I know there's probably some that are thinking this in the audience, is I knew what was kind of being created there. Those early Clubhouse days, I believe I jumped onto the original Telegram group they had. But I felt individually was like, well, I'm not actually a builder. I'm a content creator, right? Like that, literally, that was what was going through my head. And I knew some of the people that were, active in CPG originally. And I was like, big fans, huge supporters, but didn't really identify myself as that person that was like alongside them on a similar journey. And the reason I share that is because for me, part of the aha was recognizing not only, am I building things in this space, but also recognizing, the shared skill sets and a lot of the things that come across. And, Gregarious, who, shout out to Gregarious, who is a past guest of the podcast, a real close friend of mine as well. We use his tool for all of our Twitter spaces. So I know our community is very familiar with Zealous and what they have going on as well. And I remember, when Gregarious and I were talking in Miami, and he was like, Fanzo, he's like, how are you not like CPG? Like, what is that? Why haven't you made that leap yet? And for me, that's one of the things that, I started buying this NFT every day, right? And then doing the podcast every day. And I kind of just had to own the fact that I was going to sacrifice my own connection to multiple NFT projects that are in my wallet. So I hold a lot of great projects. I'm actually wearing Lazy Lion shirt right now, but for a lot of people, they know I'm a Lazy Lion, but I'm not hyper active in their Discord, right? Psychedelics Anonymous was a project that I was massively active in for a good while, but also had to recognize like, okay, that's not a project, anymore for me where that was going. And I recently, moved myself out of that. And it was actually one of those like ahas where I knew Raf, I knew what, Chris and Jamie, huge fan of my BFF and what they believe in as well. And then I saw Manushka, shout out to Manushka, who will be,
shout out to Manushka.
she'll be on the show tomorrow. So you guys are in for, I tweeted it out earlier. I was like, my audience is in for a treat. We have a great, lineup of guests. Manushka and I co-host Alpha Mondays with Shira Lazar as well. Shira will be on the show near the end of September. But one of the things that like caught me in the thinking of the building piece was, I do believe wholeheartedly in that the value in self-awareness is like knowing what you don't know so that you can surround yourself with people who know what you don't. And if you're not surrounding yourself with people who know what you don't know or aren't willing to share that, you can really feel isolated, especially even in Web3, as much as it's community driven. For me, a lot of this, buying an NFT every single day, most people couldn't even wrap their head around what the hell that even meant. And then I would say, we've done it on 28 blockchain marketplaces. And they're like, I didn't even know that many existed, right? And for me, there was definitely a feeling over the last, it started about 3 weeks ago, where I was like, I need to find my people moving forward to surround myself. And I kind of had recognized that I was using slightly what my schedule and my style was to kind of like almost self-isolated in a way. And that's a tendency, something I recognize I did, during my divorce as well, which, we share in that journey. And so for me, as I looked at CPG and being able to jump in there, which, I did last week, and excited, be a part of that community, it was amazing because the very first time I posted in the Telegram, and I'll share this for our listeners, there was like, I think 17 people that I am good friends with, that are active listeners of the podcast, we engage with on a regular basis, that were already fully in CPG. And they're like, it's about time, Fanzo. And I was like, man, like talking about like one of those things. So for a reason, I gave that big caveat there for all of our listeners, there are things that are being presented to us, right? I have like the 3 dams, and one of the dams is raise your damn hand, right? You have to raise your damn hand when an opportunity is presented. And even if you miss those opportunities, I believe it's critical to recognize like, hey, I might have missed it. I remember, like, I even went back to my email when I got like the original confirmation for CPG Telegram, and it was way back, Clubhouse days. And I was like, yeah, I believed then. But for me, it was kind of like recognizing and owning that. And then the other part of it that I really appreciated, and you and I talked about this offline before, was like people that are in the community are elevated to leadership roles, mentorship roles. That's a lot of what that Genesis represents. So I want to tie this all back together into your experience, military experience, and then what you had, you jumped, as you left the military, and, that kind of into the world that we existing, not only PTSD, but there's a completely different kind of way of life that you have to get indoctrinated into. Web3, not saying the two are the same, war and this is not the same, but there is an element of like, wow, you do have to kind of put all in on Web3, but then you have to figure out like, who else in Web3 can I have around? I'm curious, just from your, now as a COO with CPG, how did that conversation happen? Because to me, this is like, for every project founder that's out there, they know that whenever they hire me to give advice, one of the first things I say is like, you have to hire from within your community. Some of your biggest fans are going to be the biggest people that are going to be on your team. Talk to us a little bit about how that kind of came to life, because I think that's even part of the story that I think is beautiful now as well. Because I was in your, what Chris and yourself and Raf were doing the Twitter space the other day, and I was literally fist pumping the whole time and back channeling with Manushka and Gregarious, being like, "Holy, this is awesome! I love that they're doing this in the incubator." But I think a lot of that has to do with that whole full circle of Chris being willing to bring in people from the community and not make it an ego play. Can you talk a little bit about how that all kind of came to life?
Yeah, I'm gonna start with like when I interviewed at Facebook, they have this kind of chaotic culture, and I'm going to use chaos a lot because I think it's really relevant.
Yep.
And they were like, well, you come from this very hierarchical organization, the army. How do you think you'll flourish here? And I drew a picture of a triangle, and I was like, this is how hierarchies work, right? It was like, this is where the leadership happens, and then everybody does the thing below it. I was like, and that's, peacetime. like, because they're trying to keep order and discipline.
Right.
I was like, but in combat, it goes this way. And it's like everybody that is out on the front lines, like I cannot squeeze every trigger, but what I can do is train them properly, trust them that they have the same value set as me, and give them enough information that they are acting in a way that in my absence, which was most of the time, they are able to do their mission, the mission, and achieve the mission and do it in a way that is right and good. I was like, so for me, like that was every day in combat. It's every day is trusting the people that I had worked with and making sure they were trained well, but also adapting very quickly. And so when I was at Facebook, they would do these posters all over the place. They called it the Analog Research Lab. And one that struck me, and it's still on my phone today, was this image of Bruce Lee. And it says, in the midst of chaos is opportunity. And so from that, every time things would hit the fan at wherever I was, I would have to pause at a second and go like, okay, I know I got this thing burning, but also what's an opportunity that I can make out of it? And so with Club CPG and with Genesis and being in that community for a long time, when Pop launched, there was a lot of things that needed to just kind of get done. And I started really just asking questions of Chris. Like I implicitly believe in and trust Chris, and I think he has that same with me. And that's the trust that we've built up just over the months that I've been in CPG. And so being able for him to trust that I am value aligned with him, that I am acting as a good human in with the best interest in mind, gives him a certain level of, and him and Jamie a certain level of confidence. But also, like, I've interacted with a ton of folks in the community and I sort of have my own feel for it. And we just check back and forth constantly. So it was literally a couple of weeks of us just communicating on, like, the first question that I generally have for folks when they join, it's like, welcome, how can I help you? And I had just continued to do that with folks that were in Pop, like, how can I help? And I wound up standing up a couple of introduction calls and just getting people to introduce themselves and know each other and keeping track of it. And there's a bunch of folks that, I mean, I met Manushka through that, where I talked to her about her experiences, which are amazing. You guys are in for a treat tomorrow. And then really just saying, like, okay, let me, like, write a document up. Let me record a loom. Let me, like, do some things that just will help anybody who is trying to onboard into this experience. Make yourself available. That's not saying, like, give away all your time, but make yourself available. And through that process and through my experience, we were just able to carry forward a bunch of things that I think improve the organization. Again, it's built on that trust, which takes time to develop, and we're continuing to develop. And I just really had done a ton of research and believe in the mission and believe in the vision. And yeah, like, as a founder myself, and really understanding how much I love that community and how much I love what I'm working on, it was a really great fit for us to join forces.
So, and for those that are listening, they might now be getting the aha of where my intro started on, that multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate, right? One of the things that I remember being like, oh, wow, Mikey, I love that you're taking on that role with COO with CPG. And then my thought was like, oh, wait, you're also still a founder of 2cents. And in a way, the two of them make each other better, right? Because you're able to bring both of those experiences, both directions. And, Gregarious, who I mentioned before as well, similar, in roles and advisory components, right? As Billing Zealous, also playing into, Techstars and some of the other, pieces that, kind of bring us all together. And I definitely, I don't want to, Jeremiah Oyang, big shout out to Jeremiah. For those that don't know Jeremiah, I would say I always looked at him. We traveled. We were actually across the world together. We were in, it's not Morocco. It was, oh my goodness, I just had a mind blank. It was Montenegro. There we go. Montenegro, which when I said yes to going to speak in Montenegro, I thought it was in South America. And then when I had to look it up on the map, I was like, wait, on the other side of Italy? I was like, and it was one of my favorite trips that I had the year before the pandemic. But Jeremiah and I were there speaking at that event. Met Jeremiah for the first time back in South by Southwest 2013 at a community event. And he came up to me and said, I love what you're doing on social media. You should take a role in Social Media Day moving forward, right? And I thought that was such an interesting piece. And the reason I bring that up is because it also brings me into my experience joining, CPG last week. And, you had sent me some of the docs and helped, onboard me immediately. And I jumped in, and I'll just say it, I haven't even told you this. I mean, the amount of people that were willing to help. I mean, not only were they reaching out, they're like, hey, do you have all the links? If there's certain, Telegram channels you're not sure if you want to join, just send me a message. I'll let you know what they're about. And I was like, wait a second, like it wasn't a coordinated effort. And it was coordinated in the sense of the culture was doing it, but it wasn't like a top-down event. And I preached that here on the podcast, that I truly believe that one of the number one reasons communities struggle or fail at scaling is that they believe the onboarding is only the founders and the team, and it's not something that it's the culture and the community has to onboard, especially as numbers increase. And CPG, they did an amazing job of that. And I'm a holder, I'm not pumping bags. It's more of just acknowledging that journey. And in full transparency, Mikey, you were already coming on the podcast before I got into CPG, before we even had that conversation. So I think that's also kind of one of those beautiful synergies of how this whole world works. But there's also channels within that, right? When people are, I really hope people, when you're trying to take examples of NFTs or use cases, right? I think we often get stuck in like we're not Bored Apes, or we're not just a CryptoPunks picture, but there is elements of like what things unlock and the idea of like finding your people. And there's a parenting channel in the CPG family as well. And Mikey, you and I 100% bonded over GirlDad life and our co-parenting side of the house. And for me, like, it's all of those things that allow us to connect deeper with people and allow us to kind of shine brighter. Can you talk a little bit about like when we hear community, we hear building, and then we hear like surrounding yourself with builders? It still is very business oriented, but there's also this thread of like our lives. And I had posted in the CPG Telegram, like my daughter's playing in her first starting her first middle school soccer game. And not only did people champion that, but I had people reaching out the next day and say, give me an update. Like, how did your daughter do in the soccer game? And that was such a warm feeling that I was like, wow, like this is an element of caring. Can you talk about how you look at that like role within 2cents Audio, within CPG, and even as the greater Web3 whole?
100%. I think it's really easy to not think of investments in people in a tangible through physical and just acts of kindness, as well as the way that you interact with them, because that's what they are. Like you and I, like you had said, we had communicated a number of times. I had really always enjoyed talking to you when I got the opportunity to. And back to your raise your damn hand, that really was literally in my mind listening to your podcast when I was like, I just need to go to Chris and raise my hand and say like, I want to do this. And so thank you for that. Publicly, like the positivity that you bring every day and the sentiment around like how you should approach opportunities is something that really resonates with me. And so for people to make investments in small ways and large ways in community is really investing in people. It's not necessarily, I think a lot of folks are, and there's nothing wrong with being a degen in Web3. It's like, it's a thing. And that's just not personally where I put my time. I put my time into people, not necessarily, I'm not really good at flipping NFTs. It's just not, I buy something because I like it and I hold on to it.
And it's a full-time job. For anyone that we have not clearly make that a point, like flipping NFTs for a living or a profit is a full-time job. Let's be very clear.
Yeah, you're a day trader.
Yep.
And I've never been good at that, nor do I want to be, because it's just losses along the way. So for me, that investment in people and being really curious about them, you learn so much and you get back so much. Like, and it comes in a lot of ways. It comes in like the tangible, like intellect that people bring of like their experience in like e-commerce or marketing or development of apps and software or protocols. But it also comes in that sometimes you just needed somebody that was having a bad day to help them have a better day, or you're having a bad day and you put it out into the world and people help you kind of pass that by. That's so powerful, especially today when we're coming out of this time period where everyone was so isolated, and you really are coming back together. And we had a real life event in Santa Monica on Saturday. It was fantastic because the real connection of people you've been communicating with in that forum, who are like cheering you on or giving you advice, or like hitting you on the side and being like, hey man, I just saw what you posted, are you okay? Like, we don't need to thrash it out in public. Those are those are so important for like building a relationship, but also just helping you navigate this world that we're in now in this post pandemic time. And so my view is, I kind of like, you look at GM on Twitter, where people post GM and you get GMs back. I take a little bit of a different approach where like periodically I go through Telegram and I have a whole folder of people, and I just go through and I run through my check-ins of like, hey, how's it going? Anything I can help you with? What's going on? Saw this. And that investment over time for me is one that I get a lot of joy out of being able to help folks. And I also then, if the need comes along and I know that somebody's an expert in it, I'd be like, hey, can I really grab you for 10 minutes? I have like something that's really crazy. And the network of builders in Club CPG are ones where like you are probably one text message away from getting to some amazing experiences. And then if they're not going to be able to help you in that moment, they will get you to somebody who can. And so that type of experience with people that, again, you believe in how they operate and how they move through the world, you're like very much aligned. It's really really powerful. It's been we talk about like 10x and all this craziness, and it's usually in reference to growth or a floor price, but in terms of the ability to get to quality experiences through people, it's been 10x in terms of how Club CPG has helped me.
I mean, I love every piece of that. And I'll tell you, for those listening, if you skipped over episode 288, one of the things that the community was asking me a lot was like, Brian, give us tips and things to do when we join a new community. Like, how do we stand out? How do we like network? And it's actually, shout out to my very first senior VP ever it was government contractor at BA Systems. Sandeep Kaul is his name. And Sandeep, he literally told me, he's like, if you are out of sight, out of mind, it is something that you are doing. It's not a byproduct of working from home or traveling too much. And he made me, I remember I had to open up my BlackBerry, and he's like, you're going to block off the 4 to 5 p.m. hour every Wednesday, and you're going to put in there, visit the 5th floor. And because I was on the 1st floor as a help desk employee, as a brand new employee, 5th floor was where the executives lived and a lot of the management. And he was like, you need to make your presence known. You need to be around. And to this day, that still is in my calendar. This is 2004, 2005, all the way forward. And to your point, like having that list of people to check into, right? And being able to kind of follow that lead, right? It's very easy for us to be like overwhelmed or disconnected. But if we make an effort, like to show we care about individuals and check in, and that same thing kind of comes twofold. And, even we mentioned Jeremiah here, Jeremiah, in many cases has massive network in many areas. But what he does that a lot of people, can't, either don't wrap their head around is he uses that network to connect people just as a byproduct, right? Where he's like, wait a second, Mikey, how are you not part of this? Come with me. We're going to ride up there, right? Or for me, it was like, Fanzo, you need a coin. Like you and I should just have a conversation, right? And we had known each other all those years, but he brought it together. And then it was literally like, he's like, it's now yours to decide what you do with it. Like this is the way that I do it. And I love that you brought that up within your kind of networking and relationship building as well.
Look, we're divorcees, we're girl dads, and I won't say how old I am, but the idea, like with the pandemic, like making true real friendship was hard. It's hard when you have those other things and then being isolated. And I think the intentionality of like, I've made some great friends. Like I consider a lot of the folks that I just met in December in CPG Club and since to be my friends. And I've met up with them for coffees, and we've, made sure that when they're in town, we timed it, or we hung out when we got together at NFT NYC. I'm very thankful for that. And that's part of what, I believe the Club CPG is at its root, is like a lot of really interesting people that are really passionate about what they're doing, who also are really willing to help others get to where they need to go.
And if they're in it right now, let's just be very clear, like where things are not like, it's not sunshine and rainbows right now in this NFT crypto space. And to me, it's actually why I think it's the greatest time to be a part of it, because people that are here are willing to put in the effort. They see a bigger light at the end of the tunnel, but they also recognize like there is no more important time right now than right now to lock arms with, people. And I want to kind of pull the episode together here at the end by mentioning what we talked about before we got on the air. And and Delphi on our team was listening to our kind of green room conversation. She's like, press the damn button, Brian, this should be recorded. And we were just sharing, like, I was sharing this really, amazing experience with my middle daughter, just, out of nowhere, after for like the last 2 weeks having a very, I wouldn't say disconnected experience, but there was a couple times where I'm like, why didn't my daughter come up and give me a hug when she first saw me? And I know they're, I have 2 in middle school now, and I have to be that idea where daddy soon is not always going to be, their number one on their mind. But my daughter got into the van after having a couple of things in real life, and she just she gave me pretty much one of the best compliments I could ever get as a dad. Of just saying, she said every time she hangs around her friends' dads, she's reminded how much of a good dad I am, and how thankful she is for that. And I mean, I was holding back the tears. I for those that listen know, I have a thing that I have. It's called Screenshot Awesomeness, and anything awesome that happens in my life, I add it to a folder. And so last night when I got the girls down to bed, I literally opened my note and wrote down word for word, like the experience, what she said. And that's going to be where I'm going to reference next time. I'm like, oh, my 11-year-old wants me to drop her off on the side of the school. She doesn't want daddy to pick her up in the front, whatever that may be. And I was excited to share that with you, Mikey, because I know like your not only commitment to being a dad, but we're also very proud dads and very, out loud about it. And, I've shared this story here on the podcast before of, one of my early bosses, telling me that if I was going to continue to be that loud about my wife at that time being pregnant with our first, that he is like, you're never going to get promoted because people aren't going to see that as you having a commitment to your job. And it lit a fire under me since that day to be like even louder about being a dad. And thankfully, I will say many years later at a completely different event that we were at, he came up and owned the whole conversation and told me how he was so out of line, and he realized through my actions. So, but I say all of that because you mentioned, you were like, we should do like a girl dad DAO, or we should bring together, dads that are being able to not only step into how we want our daughters to see us, but even the way that we're investing or supporting others in this space, right? We mentioned about, the veteran side of the house. And then we have, with BIPOC leaders and women leaders in the space, there is something beautiful about this arena. And I'm curious just from your side, as a dad and like thinking about like that Web3 impact. I mean, I got my daughter's ledgers. I don't know if you've gone that far yet, but it became a problem because they looked at my wallet one day and they're like, Daddy, I like those yellow background ones. I was like, pick out your favorite. And then they were like, well, where do I have it? Like, where is it? And I'm like, oh, it's in my wallet. And they're like, that's not mine, Daddy. I was like, oh. So I ended up buying them a ledger and got them that side. But how are you looking at like kind of like that Web3, not only from like Ally, but being able to recognize that we can, even as dads, we can start to create a new culture where some of these things that I think weren't, I mean, my dad told me growing up, he's like, his dad told him, if you ever cry in front of your sons, they will never respect you. That was my grandfather telling my dad, because he was that hardcore Italian that was telling his dad Italian. And I cry in front of my daughters on a regular basis, including last night twice during a TV show. Talk to me a little about like how do you look at all of that as a dad, as a co-parent? Because the thing that you hit me, probably the biggest takeaway that I have from this whole episode is like you mentioned that idea of how hard it is to make friends, especially as we get older. And I don't think many of us own that enough to know, but it hit me because, I live here in Northern Virginia. There wasn't one person in my in-person friendships that reached out and said, how does your daughter do in her first middle school game? But I had about 13 people from my Web3 connections that reached out and checked in about that. And that hit me right as you were saying that, is like that idea of friendship and finding your people is unlocked in this way. And it really has, is changing, my life in many ways as well.
So I think there's two things. One is I believe that the approach that we have to build for setting the example for our daughters as men in this world is an important task. I think there's no my daughter's godfather has said there's no more important job than being a good parent right now. He's like, that is job one. He's like, you look at everything that's happening in the world, and a lot of it probably stems from poor childhood experiences for people that eventually get to power. So being a good parent and being present in that is extremely important. And it's one that I believe, look, the past couple of years have been hard. And like, I think being able to reflect on the things that the pandemic gave me in terms of this, like, I was like a workaholic for a long time. There's a lot of reasons for that. And being able to then be forced into really reflecting and being with my kids has been a gift, right? A lot of people are like, oh, the pandemic. I was like, I got time back that I was probably on a path to lose. And so the slowdown and the really refocusing on what I needed to do for my boys and for my daughter was a gift. I do think that there are pockets of the world that are looking at redefining what it means to be strong, and how that strength is not just in terms of like for men. For a long time, it's what does it mean to be masculine. I think we have to like really take that back, and be very, very conscious of how we present ourselves in the world to make sure that it is inclusive and not exclusive, but also repping all of the best parts of what it is to be a good father. And so, yeah, I cry in front of my kids constantly. And it's, they just know, they know from my time in the service and from all my experiences trying to get through PTSD that that's really just who I am now and part of what I try and share with them. Because I also then try and do very hard things professionally or in my workouts or in things. And so there isn't like strength isn't like not crying. Strength is embracing what's happening in front of me and also pushing myself in a way that, try and like lift heavy weights and run as fast as I can and do fun things. And I also think that inclusivity, like, it didn't really come up, but I'm going to kind of force it in. Like, part of my journey is like my ex is a lesbian, and so my kid's mom is a lesbian. So part of like my world is extremely important for me to have that worked into my life for being not just an ally, but being an accomplice. Like, I will go to jail for that cause,
Yep.
because that's how like it impacts me. So yeah, making friends is hard. I'm thankful. I kind of feel like I have a good one here and a new
Yeah.
one. And I think that we can all go a little bit out of our way to make sure that we're reaching out in meaningful and authentic ways to help somebody else, because that's really like when you think back to kindergarten, who are your friends? It's that kid that came up to you and was like, oh, you didn't have your lunch? You can have half of mine.
Yep.
And that's literally like how the greatest friendships generally start. It's just that when we're parents, we kind of, or you get to be an adult, you sort of like lose that because you're kind of maybe too worried about the wrong things. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of like reaching out and be yourself. And, it doesn't mean everyone is going to hit, but it also means that, you can come with that curiosity and really that non-judgmental approach, and you'll be shocked at how much you can get out of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate every ounce of what you just shared. And for those that aren't watching on video, maybe audio, Mikey is also like could bench press me. He's got ink. He's a military ex-military, and I remember when we shared that in person. And just the context, we met in Arizona at CEX. Shout out to CEX. They are actually our first sponsor of our podcast. Joe Plitzy is actually owns two of our founders NFTs for our project as well, and believed in the project. I'll actually be heading out to content marketing world, which is a fun segue there in the way this whole thing kind of comes together. But I remember, Mikey, we were talking like in person, and both of our passion for not only being girl dads but being allies in the LGBTQ plus community. And I had that conversation with my daughters last night during the VMAs, where my oldest, after the other two went away, she's like, Daddy, can I talk to you? She's like, can you help me have this conversation about, and it was I mean, crazy where this all comes together, but, little Nas was wearing a dress on stage. And I was talking to my daughter about like redefining what, colors mean and the way we dress. And my daughters know because I wear pink and very loud about my passion for pink. And she's like, Daddy, how can I have that conversation? And it was with one of her friends, and I didn't ask her if I could share that whole story, so I'm not going to share that here on the podcast. But one of the things that hit me was like, oh my goodness, like thankful, as a co-parent dad that A, she was willing to have that conversation with me, and B, to that piece of that was that, even where we're at as a culture where things are, on TV and we can start to own some of these, these dialogues. I think it's, not only exciting times by that, but it is about, surrounding ourselves and like, let's redefine culture together. And And I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate your friendships. I love that we got to meet at an in-person event. We are using 2 cents audio here. For those that are listening, you'll hear more about that. We're going to integrate some more giveaways and things into that app. So I know many of you in our Discord already have 2 cents audio downloaded, but if you don't, we'll make sure to get you taken care of on that side as well. And I'll just throw this out there, for those that are, you're questioning in-person events, you're questioning, NFTs beyond the price. There was a couple people in CPG that, messaged me and said, Brian, I don't need to ever sell my CPG for any profit, because I've already got the value that I paid to get my original pop or my original Genesis. And I will just say, for any founder out there, that's the mission, right? The mission isn't making the floor go 10x. The mission is making people feel like the value they were provided, that utility that they walked into, paid off so much so that all those other things are just bonuses and kind of cherries on the top. And I think this is gonna be a fun journey on that side. So Mikey, I'll give you any final words. I know you closed us out there a little bit before, and I really appreciate your transparency, your friendship, and excited to be now fully all in on CPG. And I had someone message me this morning, and it's like, Brian, that's the longest you've kept one PFP as your Twitter profile in a long time. And because I've had my Atari joystick there as my PFP. But Mikey, any last words from you?
Honestly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for bringing me on. Thank you for the friendship that we have. I want to give a thanks to Jamie and Chris for just creating an amazing opportunity and an amazing community. There are probably too many people to thank there, but I would be remiss if I did not thank my kids for supporting me in this journey too. I don't know that they'll ever watch this. Maybe they will. I'm thankful that this is an artifact that I get to talk with them about. And thank you so much. I'm looking forward to chatting with you more in the Telegrams and seeing how we can help each other.
For sure. And I'll make sure, your Twitter is in the bio as well for those that are listening, they want to reach out. And I'll just say, my daughters, when my thing comes up on YouTube and they see my picture, they're trying to find the ones where the screenshot or like the thumbnail is my worst expression, because they want to download that. Yeah. So if your kids do find it, that's probably where they're going to go, like mine do. And yesterday she was looking up like Dove Cameron for music awards, and she's like, Daddy, why did you pick this profile, this thumbnail? And I was like, it took me like an hour to pick that one out. What is wrong with like my so we're on that journey as dads, thank goodness these kids are honest as well. And for all those that are listening, thank you for jumping in, taking the time. I do really appreciate, we all have a certain amount of time in this world. No money can ever buy us back that time, and you committing that time to listen to just maybe this one episode, or maybe you've been on this entire journey to 292 days in a row of listening to the podcast. I appreciate you, and I hope that through conversations like this, maybe CPG isn't the answer for you, but maybe the idea of walking into another community or raising your damn hand, when you have something in front of you that could possibly become, your future role, your future community, it could be your future partner in life. You never know. And I think that is part of the beauty. If you're willing to put yourself out there and willing to, raise your damn hand, you never really know what the future holds for you. So as always, my friends, until tomorrow, make it a great day. Cheers.